Hello, friends. You know that moment when you're in a classroom and you can literally feel the energy. Students are leaning in, they're asking great questions, and they're building on each other's ideas. It's a kind of lesson where you think, this is why I became a teacher. What if I told you that those magical moments don't have to be constrained to just happy accidents? What if there's a method where you can nurture them more consistently? Here's the thing that a lot of teacher training seems to miss. We learn strategies in isolation. We learn differentiation strategies over there. We have inquiry methods over here, student engagement strategies somewhere else entirely. But it's rare, either in initial teacher training or in ongoing PD, where we can see strategies actually connect in real classroom situations. It's a bit like learning to cook by learning individual ingredients without understanding how they work together to create something delicious. And that's why I developed something I call the 9 map. I needed a way to help people to see teaching and learning strategies and to picture intentionally moving between them. And I think that once you see how this works, you won't be planning lessons in the same way again. Now, I spent a lifetime in this sphere that we call education. Time to observe, time to think, time to reflect. So let me tell you about Sarah, a biology teacher. About 7 years experience, really knew her subject content, but she was a little bit stuck. She was teaching photosynthesis again and watching her year 9 students' eyes glaze over again. It's the traditional approach, explain the process, show the diagrams, give out the worksheets. Some kids get it, most of them don't. And by next week, she's pretty sure that half will have forgotten most of it and the other half probably forgotten half of it. Does that sound familiar? Well, contrast this with Dave. Dave also has many years of experience, maybe a few more even. But he has a constant itch of wanting to find better ways to connect with his groups. He saw that transformational teaching isn't about the perfectly polished PowerPoint presentation, well, that's a mouthful, or finding the perfect strategy. It was about understanding when to use which approach and how to move purposefully between them. It was through these types of observations that I created the 9 map, which was built on 6 learning principles that create 9 distinct teaching profiles. 3 of these principles are directly driven by the teacher's planned approaches, and these other 3 are the intended interactions and affect on student learning. Think of each axis as a continuum from foundational to aspirational. The intersections of these 2 axes gives us 9 learning profiles. Obviously, we aspire to higher order thinking and student agency, pushing up and across these axes. But that doesn't mean that the other profiles don't play their part. On the contrary, they're foundational building blocks along the way to empowerment. A foundational component of effective learning is creating an environment where students feel safe, supported by the interactions with their peers, and a sense of belonging so they have the confidence to take risks in their learning journey. From there, these profiles build to promote the development of skills, conceptual understanding, and character traits of resilience and agency. Not one profile is better than the others. It's about balance and creating the right conditions at the right time. When to build, when to push. Think of it like a heat map for learning. It shows you exactly where your students are and the alternative routes to get them to where they need to be. And this is where Dave's approach was impactful. Instead of diving straight into chlorophyll and scientific terms, he started with a bit of a funny story about his grandmother's small garden, a story about how she would gather seeds and dry them or take cuttings from other plants. The students would be having a bit of a laugh, sharing their own plant disasters, talking about their family gardens or lack of them. It was just a few minutes, but suddenly they weren't sitting there. They were connected. They were connected to him. They were connected to each other's stories. This is what I now call the relationship builder profile, creating the foundations of trust and belonging, a safe space for learning. David shifted gears. Instead of explaining photosynthesis, he presents a mystery. He said that plants gain weight as they grow, but they're not eating food like we do. So where does all that mass come from? He was shifting to inquiry mode, to build curiosity and to use these questions as a baseline for what the students may already think they know, observing closely those that were putting forward suggestions while gently encouraging some of the quieter ones to share their thoughts. This was a shift to the curious explorer. Students started hypothesizing. Is it in the air? Is it the water? Is it the soil? The brains were working, constructing understanding and connecting things that they may have observed themselves, instead of just being passive recipients of information. This is the active participant profile, and you could see the difference immediately. Students were soon discussing and designing their own experiments. Light versus dark, high CO2 versus normal air. They weren't just learning about photosynthesis, they were thinking like scientists. They were analyzing real data, investigating how photosynthesis connects to climate change, to food security, to renewable energy. They were seeing their classroom learning connected to the real world. So instead of disengaged students passively trying to absorb things the teacher thinks important, now the students were presenting permaculture garden designs to me for co-curricular activities. They were creating educational videos for younger kids, and they were partnering with local environmental groups. They'd gone from being knowledge consumers to knowledge creators. And this is what the 9 map reveals. Excellent teaching isn't about finding the one best method, the one perfect presentation. It's about orchestrating different approaches at just the right moments to challenge, support, and liberate learners. Think about your own teaching for a second. Maybe you think you're naturally great at explaining things clearly. That's the inform side of the map. Or perhaps you love getting students to discover and explore. That's your Inquire strength. Some teachers have natural gifts as being motivators who inspire students to exceed their own expectations. All of these matter, but the transformation happens in the transitions, like shifting gears in a car at just the right time. When you can read what your students need right now and shift your approach accordingly, that's when things change. That's when you get real momentum going. If they're feeling overwhelmed or reluctant to participate, time to build relationships before pushing content. Are they confident and curious? Release their agency and empower them as learners. Here's what I've observed with teachers like Dave. Students become partners in their own learning instead of passive recipients. Retention improves because concepts are embedded in relationships and real contexts. Most importantly, students develop genuine agency. That's the difference between covering the curriculum and transforming minds, between delivering content and nurturing thinkers. So maybe think about your lesson plans for next week. Can you identify which of the learning profiles you're naturally using and which ones you might want to experiment with? Are you always starting with an explanation when maybe your students need exploration first? Are you keeping them in safe, structured activities when they're ready for a more creative challenge? The 9 map isn't just about better lesson planning. It's about recognizing the profound impact we can have when we can understand learning as a dynamic, relational, transformational process. Those magical classroom moments where student learning thrives, they're experiences you can nurture intentionally, consistently, and powerfully. There's so much more to explore about how each of the profile works and when to use them, but that's another conversation. So what resonates with you? Which profiles do you recognize in your own teaching? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Because ultimately, this isn't about just better teaching strategies. It's about the incredible humans that are sitting in our classrooms and the one chance they have of learning and creating their future.